In the world today, we have enough resources to solve most human problems. We can build cities, hospitals all over the world if we use resources. But if you conscripted all the money in the world, there's not enough money to build hospitals and housing all over the world and finance the education of students. But we do have enough teachers and enough buildings we can use for universities. We have the resources. Money is an interference because it limits our ability and it limits our dreams.
Imagine the possibilities of an unprecedented mobilization of scientific and technical alliances toward problem solving without the interference of money or politics to initiate global unification and restoration.
This could easily enable a high standard of living for all. This is what Jacques Fresco had in mind when he proposed a resource-based economy.
If our planet ran out of resources, no matter how much gold or money or possessions you had, you could not survive. Our entire survival is based upon resources.
The old world is ending.
And we have the opportunity to rethink everything.
This is a show about the systemic problems in our world.
And the real solutions we have today.
To transition from an apocalyptic storm of war, scarcity, and ecological collapse.
To create an abundantly advanced, collaborative society.
That sustains all life.
You may think it's an impossible dream.
But the alternative is an inevitable nightmare.
We're your hosts, Matt Holton,
Amanda Smith,
and Zachary Marlowe.
And together,
we can move past this economic absurdity
and come together to actualize our collective potential.
To create something completely new.
We are
Moneyless Society.
So it's clear that the old system is failing. It's falling apart in real time. We don't really need to convince you. You just have to look at the world and be able to correlate all of the fuck-ups that you see going around you in the world and put them together into a synchronous narrative to understand it's not working. It's coming down. The old systems, the old way of life, the old social order, the old economic system, the political system, all these intertwined mechanisms for managing our resources and controlling our society and keeping us from blowing up are failing us. And so the big question, the question people ask me every day, well, what's the alternative? What's the solution? What can we do about it? And the term that we've come to, the movement, the vision, the alternative system that is the most coherent, the most requisite for this moment and for the stakes that we are faced with is, as I believe, a resource-based economy, a term coined by Jacques Fresco, who modeled it in the Venus Project, whose plans and blueprints and imaginings and scientific renderings and realistic steps to create this world and create a new system that we can all transition into are, I still think, the greatest and the most sophisticated and advanced to date. So that's the topic of this day's episode. What is a resource-based economy? And so to answer that question, we've brought on a good friend who actually just flew here from Singapore, Abu Bakr Harakat, who has started an organization he calls RBE United, Resource-Based Economy United. And so here, that's the topic of today's episode. We're ready to unite and take us there to that new place, that new system, that new way of life. So, Abu Bakr, can you define what it is? What is a resource-based economy?
So it's an umbrella term that was put together by a man named Jacques Fresco, laid back in the 1960s as part of a project that was then called socio-cyberneering. And the term resource-based economy referred to this idea of an economic system that was based on the natural resources of the land, wherein all the resources are considered common heritage of all the world's people. So another way of, like I said, another way of defining it would be to say that a resource-based economy is a socioeconomic alternative to the standard model of capitalist economics, or that it's a socioeconomic system wherein all the foods and services are available to everyone without the use of money, barter, debts, or servitude. So that's generally what it means. As far as how it is applied, that's a different matter entirely, and that depends on the governance model that you use, and that's sort of a more kind of technical thing that technical challenge that you come across when you're talking about how to apply the idea of resource-based economy to the real world. Like, how would it actually look like? What sort of systems would be used to back it? Would it be something like cryptocurrency, or would it be something else? So, but all of that aside, a resource-based economy in general is an economy that is based on the resources of the land, of the world, and it is a model wherein all the resources are considered common heritage. So there is no capital that is being, invested or accumulated anywhere.
I like the term so much, and I think it is a starting point. It's a common like life ground that economics, as we know it, comes from the term oikos, management of a household, and that's not what it's about. It's become the study of money. It's become the study of this abstract process of managing this, effluvium of debt and money and numbers in a computer that really doesn't have a physical referent in reality. It's not connected and tethered to the real resources of the earth. And the word resource doesn't just mean an inventory for exploitation. It means the relationships that we have to land, to wildlife, to our natural habitats, to the life generating real wealth of the world, which is currently being blown up and squandered and turned into dust, to be turned into plastic, to be turned into numbers in a computer. That's what wealth is in this current socioeconomic construct, which has nothing to do with real the ability for us to flourish and to foster real humanity and human values and to meet our needs. That's the crazy thing, that our economic system is life blind. It's blind to our needs. It's blind to the Earth's actual capacities, and that's why we're in this crippling resource overshoot and climate change, because we aren't, we're not playing with any. The abacus that we're using to make calculations is just completely untethered from the world.
Right. Financial markets have absolutely nothing to do with like the real world as it is. So um, like a tree is only has value for until there is a point that like you tear it down, you destroy it, and create products out of it. Before then, a tree has no value, and in that line of thinking, the human being also, and human being in of itself has no actual value until that human being is applied within the economy to do some laborious task or what have you. And that's generally how life is looked at within the standard model. And yeah, and our challenge is on how basically to move from the current standard model to the alternative. So to take everything that we know, everything that we've learned, and kind of put it together to figure out a pathway and like stepping stones and milestones from where we are now to where we need to be.
If I may interject here, my mind is racing with thoughts about what the world is like today and how grim it is. And anytime someone brings up a resource-based economy, I feel a sense of relief and hope that, obviously things could be a lot better. You had told us that you were working on an RBE type demo plan, if you will. Correct me with more certain terms when I'm finished, if you like, and that you had wanted to launched this in the Philippines, I believe it was. And the whole time we've been sitting here, I've been thinking about how in the news we learned a day, maybe 2 days ago, it's been now, that Putin's magnum opus was blown up, the Crimea Bridge, and how that may be taunting at nuclear war, as we've been told many times since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began. And so with that in mind, and then us talking about the RBE, the contrast that keeps coming to me is how much more peaceful an RBE environment would be. But that is really hard to achieve on a political front, as you touched on a moment ago when you were explaining it, how to apply it in real life and how politics play a part in that. And I've been really curious what you've encountered in the Philippines, or where you've been trying to make a difference and make room and space to start this project.
Right. Yeah. There's there isn't much we can do as far as like these big geopolitical issues like Russia, like what's happening between Russia and the United States, or the United States aggressing China and trying to start a global nuclear war for profit reasons. So but like it's we still have to continue operating despite like the threat of like a nuclear Armageddon. So having said that, like in the Philippines, especially, I found that that's where I was, by the way, for the last 6 months, basically trying to answer this question of what do we do from here on out. Like, so we have the understanding of what the problem is. Generally speaking, the problem that we're facing is an economic management problem. We need to organize ourselves, organize our communities, organize these communities that are pro resource-based economics and holistic living and so forth, and organize them in real life into these real life planned communities where they have the resources that they need and so forth in order to grow and in order to build the economy of the future. So that's the question that I was trying to answer, and I found that the Philippines is a great place to go as far as putting a project like this together. Despite like there are challenges, and anywhere you try to set up shop, there are going to be challenges. I found, of course, legal challenges and so forth. But all that aside, it is a place that is very rich in resources. It is rich in fish resources. It is rich in a plethora of natural resources. There are many communities of very industrious people who are very willing and able and excited to be part of such a vision. Everybody who I spoke to within local governments and as well as NGOs like the idea of a community of say of what they basically saw as green activists, but I really don't know exactly how to define the global RBE movement, as anything other than just this like very wild movement of many different pieces and organizations and people operating sort of chaotically. So because it's not one leader, leader-led movement or anything like that. So, but the idea is to bring everybody together in one place to actually work and get things going. The Philippines would be a good place to do that because local government is supportive. And that's basically the question I was trying to ask: is how do you go about achieving that? And I pretty much came across a number of roadblocks. Basically, most of them come down to the issue of such a vision would be very expensive monetarily, and the first thing to try and figure out before moving forward is how do you go about financing it in the long term. But that's one of the many kind of little issues that will have to be dealt with along the way. So yeah, but I hope that answers kind of like the question there.
Yeah.
To sort of pick up a thread there that about the wars going on in the world. I mean, we're not going to go too deep into it because we don't want to get our channel stripped from us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you poke the bear enough and go against the narrative that is
favored,
basically just barreling us toward nuclear war and call for peace. I mean, everybody's for peace. Everybody says they're for peace. As like George Carlin said, fighting for war is like screwing for peace. Everybody wants that. They say they want that, but they push for war at every turn. I mean, anything that goes against a war narrative, the United States has had multiple opportunities to facilitate peace in those regions. And China very early offered to mediate peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, and the United States and NATO said no, because that directly goes against their bottom line. It goes against their interests, and their largest industry, their largest export to the world is armaments and war. And this really is one of the crucial issues with the current system, is that there is incentive for war. Mm-hmm. There is not an incentive for peace. There is not an incentive within a monetary system, a market system, for abundance, for people being given the things that they need without the need to submit to labor, utilizing automation and machines and more sophisticated egalitarian ecological practices like agroforestry that do not require as much constant activity and subjugation. And so, that this system is very alien to most people, and I'm sure to most governments whose idea of bettering their people and their situation it comes about through growth, through economic growth and industrialization. And this is sort of the trap that the Chinese system, the Chinese Communist Party, has undertaken. And there's a dialectic, there's a reasoning behind that they are faced with this dominant economic force, the United States, the Western hegemony, and their path to developing against that and defending themselves is through global trade and global markets. And so, the big questions of how do we transition to this sort of system on a global sense, I think is a question. It's something we don't fully know. And I think it must be informed by a green activist movement that has its foundation in finding this opportunity wherever in the world we can go, and in as many places as we can, to form our own model communities that showcase just what we're talking about. To say, okay, governments, politicians, you say that your goal is to help the people. Well, what helps the people? Food, water, shelter, providing them the things that they need to live. As Jacques Fresco said many times, people don't want money. We don't want economic growth. We want the happiness of our people. We want to be able to thrive and flourish, and we want to be able to have food in our stomach. We want to be able to access the things that money is merely a middleman that keeps us away from.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't. I don't think that the transition to this alternative system is going to happen basically as one massive step, or one sort of planned movement forward. Like it's the idea that I've thought about this quite a bit, is the idea that of having this transition that is immediate, where everybody just suddenly kind of moves forward towards this this alternative vision, would be so chaotic that, like, when, and not to kind of step into the realm of conspiracy theory or whatever, because there's a lot of very wild ideas that are unfounded. But when you look now to for example, the Davos talks, I'm pretty sure you guys might be familiar with the World Economic Forum, the stuff that they're saying as far as as controlling global supply chains, and using I don't want to say anything that might get the channel taken down, because there's a lot of pushback against anything that might seem conspiratorial or what have you. But a lot of the things that are coming out of say the World Economic Forum, as far as their plans for controlling the global supply chains, as far as controlling food production, and having members of their the World Economic Forum purchasing a tremendous amount of farmland and so forth, it makes it seem to me that any kind of move to purchase a lot of farmland and then do some sort of alternative ecological sustainability and living movement will probably draw a lot of attention, and might be stopped via legal action and so forth. So the way that I foresee this movement moving forward is by people independently purchasing large amounts of land, and then doing planned communities on these pieces of land. And then that would incentivize other people to do the same. And over a long period of generational time, you might end up at more structured communities that are using full-blown resource-based systems to then take the resources that they're making and then redistribute them across. But that's just something that I foresee. Could be wrong, of course.
Well, but you're brave to look that far ahead, and you make a point that I hadn't heard anyone else make in regards to that simultaneous step forward, such as the TVP asserts that that is the only way that we can all move into a resource-based economy, is to do it globally all at once. But you said that would be way too chaotic. That would be way too much all at the same time, pretty much in most general terms. And I hadn't heard anyone point that out before, and I have to admit I hadn't thought about it that way either, and that makes perfect sense. While we don't want to advocate for incrementalism and say that it's okay if this takes decades upon decades upon decades to happen, because obviously it would seem that we don't have that kind of time. It is more practical to accept the fact that it can't happen all at once, let alone overnight, and that it is going to happen in steps. That's why it's called a transition. And in my head, if I may share what I foresee could possibly happen, is basically a situation in which we start influencing the feedback loop significantly enough that the feedback we're getting as the population, turns into what it is that we are seeking. So basically, similar to what you were describing, where it starts out as smaller communities in contrast to a global community, are making these changes, and it pollinates, and so now you have nodes all over the globe that are living in these ways as much to the farthest point that they can in the current system, to the point that the system has to start giving in to that way of life, or everything goes one way or the other. It gets really bad, or it gets a lot better.
Well, I think it's like the idea of a top-down transition frightens people, and that's one of the reasons why people are so
rebellious
affronted by the Agenda 21 and the things that the IMF talks about, and their
New World Order,
Great Reset agenda, and all that stuff. Yeah, all this stuff that doesn't really. It's just like basically half-assed ways to keep capitalism going, and that those organizations don't really have the power that we think they do, because really the chaos of the market is so dispersed, and power is so it's consolidated in a very few number of hands, but it's still very chaotically spread around the world into the people who have the money's hands, and not the people, not any group or council or elite. And so the idea of transitioning globally all at once in this top-down way, whether it's stewarded by scientists or not, I don't think the general population is going to go for that. Really, I think it has to be a ground-up, inclusive, connected movement where the people are participating in this. Now, I do think that it's needed, it's vitally needed and necessary for us to make big picture, global, international transformations quickly. I mean, it's going to happen eventually. As the climate tears us apart, we are going to transform in one way or another, and we could transform into some kind of horrible eco-fascist nightmare. That's highly likely. Or we could, if pushed by a people's movement and an educated population that calls for it, that rejects the austerity that will be imposed upon us by, farmers having their water supplies taken from them when things start collapsing, or, people being ushered into cities, or people being made, unnecessary. Basically governments saying, your livelihood is not necessary anymore, or you must leave your what. I can't go that deep into the imagining of what the fuck is going to happen. I just don't want to. It's
That's
dark.
a separate show,
It's
right? And very dark.
People plugged into a metaverse that distracts them from what they're doing, as they're plugged into an ever more abstracted, ephemeral economy of pure likes themselves, with a currency that's so decoupled and so consolidated in so few hands that it is an almost anti-resource based economy, where the money in our world becomes less and less substantial and more elusive and weird, and the authoritarian ability for governments and states and state powers and city states and fiefdoms run by corporations can grab up and gobble the resources as they please.
Yeah.
But I see another alternative there, and that's the people coming together and forming these communal movements, starting from that strong point of not needing the existing system, of being able to meet their needs without it. And that gives them a platform to organize upon. And if we can show people around us, look, we're living in an easier, better, cleaner, safer, healthier, and more fun way, they're not going to want what the government is offering or not offering, is demanding, and they're not going to comply. And I think that's a very important shift as an educator and as a creator and as a builder, anyone listening, anyone watching, anyone in this movement, which is a movement. I do see people like yourself, Abu Bakr, around the world with this impulse to create these communities based upon the ecological concerns as a new kind of activism. Peter Joseph has talked about that before, his networked activist approach, and that activism of shaking signs and slogans is utterly ineffectual. Getting carried off by some, police officers screaming about how we need to just stop oil, as I've seen a clip going around, is not activism. It's just noise, and it feeds the contrast of the establishment narrative.
Right.
Activism is building an alternative. Activism is building change, and I think that's what you're working on as well.
Right, and I think the as far as the whole, Peter Joseph also mentioned something in one of his films, which is no conspiracy required. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to there, is that there doesn't need to be an active conspiracy between very powerful people for the things that we're seeing to transpire. For example, for there to be starvation all over the world while we waste half of the aggregate calories that we are making planet wide. So there is that, and yeah, there are forces out there that are indeed conspiring, and it's the idea that a small group of people are going to be able to successfully take over the world is a little ludicrous, regardless of how much money
they have. They're called corporations,
right?
Yeah, and politicians. Well, they're in the same bed, so one is the same as the other, I suppose.
Right. So it's not possible, regardless of how much money or political influence you have, because there is just too many things happening, too many people, too many cultures, too many differences between people to be controlled like cattle. And yeah, like all of these things that are happening are also pushing people to look for alternatives, and everywhere you go, people are looking for that alternative, whether they know it or not. They are seeking that RBE alternative, or whatever in their head is something that's going to change the world order, that's going to change things for them at the personal level, and everyone is working towards it, but they are not working in an organized fashion. So with the things, for example, like Garden, which is one of a number of such developments. I know our Havana project has something similar in South America. And there are obviously a number that I might not know about that you guys might be familiar with, of other developing eco-villages all over the world, and other smaller planned communities that are trying to find ways to kind of make life better for their denizens. What we're trying to do, of course, is different in that this is specific to resource-based economy. So we're not just trying to find another a nice place to live necessarily, but also a place to work on how to develop other eco-villages and how to assist other communities and people, such as indigenous people, for example, from our area of operation, which would be the Philippines and Palawan, and assisting them in building their own ecological villages. So, and sorry for my voice there, was sick a few days ago. But in assisting these communities in building their own villages, and then having all of these villages operating together through some sort of cryptocurrency token in order to share resources and share information and knowledge amongst themselves. And of course, the development of these subsystems like this, such a cryptocurrency token, is other work that's other stuff that's in the works, but it requires much more attention and also much more money in order to put these tokens together and create smart contracts and so forth, as I'm pretty sure a lot of people within RBE community understand. So it's quite a bit of work, and that's the challenging part about it, is not only in drawing people's attention and drawing the attention of local leaders and local government, but also in being able to do something that's going to bring funding from the outside in to such a project. Especially projects taking place in the global south, where there is not that much in terms of monetary resources to draw from those smaller governments. But no matter how you slice it, like this is the way things are going. People are moving towards these alternative systems. I think it's a lot smaller scale now than it will be in the future. But definitely, any of us now working on how to put these things together are kind of at the forefront of what the future of local governance and communities are going to be like. But that's at least that's the way I foresee things, seeing kind of like how society is sort of slowly deteriorating and financial systems are breaking down, and asking, well, if all the global financial markets were to fail, soon, if the global monetary system was to fail, what would happen next? Right, like then people are going to need, they can't just disappear. They're going to need some alternative economy to fall into. So if we begin in establishing at least the basic framework of such a system, then it'll be there when it's needed.
A bit of backtracking, but I wanted to point out an irony in all that Marlo was saying, and a bit of what you were saying, Bobby. I find it amusing that people would be so resistant to some form of top-down transition into a socioeconomic environment that would literally save our lives and the planet, because obviously we're already allowing people to make decisions about life and death, to blow the world up to smithereens, to churn every bit of our ecological resources into something consumable and marketable. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, because that always catches me off guard. Like, why do we allow people to do that? Why do we allow people to represent us and make those kinds of decisions, but a top-down, quote-unquote, top-down transition into something that would literally save scores and scores of people and species and the planet itself, But no, I agree that it does need to be a grassroots movement, because even if we had a quote-unquote top-down transition of sorts like that, it would be ineffectual without people realizing these things for themselves on a personal and even cellular level. We've got to shift the paradigm. And if we don't do that, then we're just doing more of the same that we're doing now, which is taking orders and going in whatever direction our influencers tell us to go.
I was going to say that people accept it, or people would be against it, because they're indoctrinated to think that they're not under a one world government of capital in a totalitarian vice grip that is strangling the life out of us every single day, taking more and more and more of our freedom and autonomy in every single aspect of our lives. We're free, right? Mm-hmm. We're in the freest country in the world. We have a democracy. We have a thriving, robust democracy, right? Yeah. That's what people think. That is one of our most important roles, is to smash that. And by the way, and to smash people's belief in that.
When it comes to specifically to governance, and so people, when we talk about like an alternative economy and so forth, the question always comes up: well, who makes the decisions? And that's a completely valid question. But who makes the decisions? This is a question that's going to be answered by different groups of people in different ways. It doesn't have to be one. It's not just one answer. Who makes the decisions? Well, we're going to have a king, and that's going to be the governance model, and that's all there is. Maybe like in a new world, a new world of human beings organizing themselves and creating new governments and what have you. Maybe one group of people does decide to go the route of fascism. Maybe one group of people does decide to go the route of monarchy, or one group of people does decide to go the route of representative democracy, or whatever. There has to be room for everyone to kind of to go their own route and to be happy with the governance model that they've selected for themselves. So one person in popular media that says this a lot, and is Russell Brand. So Russell Brand is obviously really popular right now, and he has a channel, and he's sometimes talks about these issues, and he'll say things like, we have to have a world where I can be whatever I want, you can be whatever you want. And I think any kind of a world where we can all live tolerate each other, live alongside each other, and and live lives without the threat of war and economic sanctions and all these geopolitical problems. It would have to be a world that allows people to try out different governance models and to pick whatever they want. So maybe once you might have an eco village that does decide to go the route of fascism, for example. I can't imagine it, but maybe something like that does happen. The system that you're building has to be able to take that and take the fact that you have people who want to go and live a fascist lifestyle, but not break down, and to be able to tolerate different approaches and different governance models. But again, that's something that I think would have to be taken into account, that you're going to have different people. You're going to have people like the Boogaloo Boys, for example, who want to carry around firearm. You can have evangelical Christians and so forth. You can have many different cultures and different people, and they all have to be able to play by their own rules within this global system without the system breaking down.
I think part of the problem and the reason that our global system is breaking down is it's decentralized in all the wrong ways and not in the right ways. It's culturally dispersed, and we live in this individualized paradigm that says that your individual personal expression trumps everything else. And I think that that's an attitude that needs to be evolved beyond. We need to understand that a capitalist, so to say like, oh, somebody, we need to have, if somebody wants to be a capitalist, we need to give them the freedom to do that. But being a capitalist means you have the personal freedom yourself to exploit other people's and take their freedom away in a zero-sum game. I think, you talk about the Boogaloo Boys, they're pretty fascist in their desires, in their drives. The Christian right is very fascist in their desires. And many of these whole identities merely exist to be a smokescreen and sort of like a distraction or a mythology to perpetuate, blind acceptance of capital, accumulation and domination, and these massive systematic forces that people don't even see, can't touch, much like a god, that rule our lives on sheer belief. And I think it's a very difficult question of how do we approach overcoming that. The ideal answer is, of course, education. We educate people so that they're more able to function on a daily basis and evolve out of those values. And I think that the biggest piece of that, the biggest component we come back to, is people must see an alternative and experience it. It can't be hypothetical, in the same way that our monetary system is based upon nonsense, an assumption, a promise, this thing that we believe in, that I can take my money out of my wallet and that it has value. That's a belief. It's a very superstitious notion. And I just think it's so silly that anybody could look at what we're talking about and say it's naive. And it's like, brother, you believe in money. You believe money is real. That is the most superstitious bullshit imaginable.
Right?
Yeah, you think trickle-down economics works, and that we live in a democracy, and that, it's just, it's all fantasy. And we need to rapidly evolve out of that. And I think the way to do that is to learn by doing. Most people learn by doing,
by example.
I think about like that sort of a perspective of like a World War II level transformation, that a lot of people accepted forms of sacrifices through a war, in an authoritarian way. And I'm not, of course, calling for an authoritarian transition, but people did accept it, and they were proud of it. And I think about the book Ecotopia a lot, where they intentionally crashed their economy and installed what they call a survival economy. And they talk about how the people in that society were, they had to tighten their bootstraps or their shoestrings or whatever. They had to make do with less. They had to struggle and make sacrifices. But ultimately, if people are participating in the building of a new world, they're going to accept those sacrifices, and it's going to be with a thrill, with a sense of adventure. And with, it's like the reason people go to see horror movies, because they need a little bit of that adrenaline in their lives to feel that they're still alive. We are lacking that. We are lacking that sense of connection and adventure and, the struggle, the real struggle in our lives. We have to spook ourselves with fake skeletons once a year just to remind ourselves that our heart is still beating.
Yeah, and that is an exciting thing, right? Like is an exciting thing. Like the prospect of actually building an alternative, the prospect of building a new system. That is very exciting. Like when you think about it, and that's kind of the opportunity that we would be giving people if we put our minds together into developing these these platforms for building the alternative. Is that you're giving people the opportunity to not just maybe change their personal lives for the better. Say if you're operating somewhere in the global south where you might be able to give people a better standard of living by working with you, but you're also helping build something for generations to come, something that's going to inspire people to build similar products, similar product is the wrong word, but say similar townships, or build upon it, add solar systems in the future and so forth. And you're giving people like a multi-generational projects to operate within. So
I agree. Yeah, what we build today, in all hopes, will benefit someone tomorrow, so to speak. So you were mentioning Russell Brand, and we're talking about leadership and politics. Marlo's talking about connection, and you're talking about excitement. And there's the mention of adrenaline, and I'm thinking, how exciting would it be to get somebody like Russell Brand roped into one of these conversations? So often, myself, and I've heard Marlo mention it too, it frustrates us to see people such as Russell, with the platform that he has, come so close to opening up that dialogue on his platform about what if money wasn't a thing. A lot of these personalities, like Jason, I want to say Jason Hickel, he's got the books, he's got the Twitter, and he's got all the right ideas. Never heard him say, what if money wasn't a thing? Everybody comes so close. But I'm bringing up Russell Brand because he made a tweet recently, and it said, do we have the right systems and leaders in place to change the world? I think the answer is obvious. Mine/MoSo's reply to that was, do we need leaders in the conventional sense, or do we need to do away with the hierarchical structures, inherently removing class stratification and laying the foundation for true equality and democracy?
Hey, I sent Russell Brand an email myself.
Yeah.
Well, I did.
I'll cross my fingers for you.
That's right. I did send the emails out to people that I thought would be interested in the work that we're doing with RBE United and building the Garden Eco Village and Research Center, and it was him and a number of other people that I thought might be interested. But you would think individuals who are looking for the alternative ought to advertise that alternative. But I think it's also like with popularizing this idea, it's it'll be easier once there are more popular people talking about it, such as Russell Brand. But it's also just getting a large number of people within social media kind of bouncing these ideas back and forth would be enough to maybe spark a global conversation.
The issue with connecting with these celebrities, these people in this sort of big platform, this who have this real power to change people's lives with one sentence uttered on their large show and things like that, is that it all gets back into one of the main problems with the class structure that negatively affects rich people is that there's very few rich people compared to the non-rich. And so they live in a small community, they live in a small world that's isolated, and in some senses has to be, because you can't just open your doors to all these millions of people that have this parasocial relationship with you where they know your name, they know all about you, you know nothing about them. And it would probably break your mind to like have this X-Men like Charles Xavier like connection of empathy and understanding of all these people's lives. It would blow your head up. It
literally would.
And so we are often kept from ideas that would enlighten us and would free us and would inspire and excite us, because there simply aren't able to penetrate through that structure. You're not able to get through the agents and the organization and the emails. I mean, people like that get millions of emails a day, or I don't know how many emails they get, but they get tons of people trying to get their ear and pitch something and sell something to them. and ride their coattails. And this is one of the main issues with wealth, is that, and it's why it insulates people's minds and it rots their brains, is because you need to shut yourself off to more and more and more percentage of humanity so that you can focus on just keeping your mental space clear. And, like if you're the wealthy can't trust. Really, money is antitrust. It's the most antitrust thing in the world. Every time you use money, you're reinforcing the story that we are separate. Our needs are separate. Our intentions and goals and lives and existences are separate every time you do it.
You just wonderfully described how social media isn't a tool of connection, saying that you have to cut yourself off more and more from people, and how especially the hierarchy profiles, if you will, such as celebrities, how they are inundated with outreach, and that is physically and emotionally impossible to completely capacitate. And that causes you to shut people out. Social media is the opposite of connection in that sense, actually. And it's just part of the psyop that we're being fed to make us believe and feel like we're actually connected just because we can talk to Bobby here from somewhere else in the world. That's great when we take it to that level. But on the surface, everyone's just given a little stage and told that they're making a difference and they're actually making connections.
And ultimately, it's a marketplace where we're competing. We're competing for likes. We're competing for comments and attention and engagement.
A form of currency.
And all of that is ultimately, it's a currency. I was thinking about this the other day that, and I mentioned, kind of danced around this dystopian future where that is the currency that we are fighting over each other for, and it doesn't exist at all. It has no reference to anything. It's not a measure of anything. It's just literally like a glutinous attention. It's just like attention and credibility that people will say, oh, he has a lot of likes, he must be doing something right. And that's very toxic to us on a social level. And I'm sure that people in the 1% or the celebrity class or whatever they are, would like to be able to trust more, would like to be able to live in a world where they don't have to go around with bodyguards and managers and all these people keeping them from that. And that's an unfortunate side effect of our society that worships the individual so heavily that great artists and great thinkers and speakers and ideas aren't able to move through society efficiently because of the regressive algorithmic sort of flow of information and the inability for brilliant people to be able to, we don't have a mechanism that's looking for good ideas. I just recorded a really beautiful interview with this total genius old friend of mine who's like an expert in AI. And he just knocked it out of the park, just explaining like the current state of AI and it's the problems with it, and how it's all this. It exists today. Very intelligent machines are watching us, tracking us, our every move, our every facial expression, our every impression, and using that for the power consolidation of these multinational fiefdoms, these corporations. And he just blew my mind with all this stuff about like nanotechnology merging with AI to create, augmented humanity and like superpowers and all this really like attainable stuff. And then at the end of the interview, he was just like, stopped recording. And he was like, yeah, it really sucks that like I work at a fucking grocery store and can't find a job doing anything in this field. And it's like, you're a genius. Yeah. You're working at a fucking grocery store.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate subterfuge of our resources, our human resources, that we have geniuses bagging groceries. Yeah. And it just makes me want to fucking scream. It makes me want to shake people. It makes me want to cry every time I go to a restaurant or a store and I see a human being who is capable of conceiving entire worlds, who is in the right circumstance able to connect with that inner genius, that inner inventor, that inner Jacques Fresco that could sit down and envision a whole new world and how to get there and all the machines to do it. And yet that person is just buried in debt and scar tissue in the brain and stress and a lack of education and awareness and life experience. And that's because of our economic system.
Chained
that's because
to
of this
a wage slave system.
And impressive people are all over the world. I mean, everywhere you go, I always come across people who are just like fascinating, really smart at in one field or another. Sometimes it's in a technical field, for example, fishing or farming and so forth. You have all of these really amazing people. Yeah, and all of them basically, us, I shouldn't say them, I said we, everyone, all of us are fighting in this kind of a rat race system, where we're always just chasing to make the next dollar so that we can survive, whatever it is you happen to be doing. It's always wrapped around this very kind of self-centered and short-sighted game of just making enough money to make the next batch of money. People are working in order to survive, in order to wake up and then go to work again. And it's, yeah, like you say, tremendous amount of mental capital being wasted, because if a sensible economy would take all of this mental capital and take all of this labor and then place it in areas where it's going to generate the most benefit to society. And yeah, like since our system, the one we happen to be born into, isn't that, we have to create something else to transition into. The challenge now is, with creating something that we are going to transition into, that itself, I found the biggest roadblock is it requires a tremendous amount of monetary resources to actually do it. So what I find is, there are a number of groups of people that are in their own individual ways trying to sort of push the envelope, create something new, but they're all stuck in the same system, and they're all stuck in either waiting for grants or just fighting to make ends meet, or their members trying to fighting to make ends meet. And the only way to overcome this is by bringing people together in one physical place, one fully funded center, something to that effect, that's going to allow individuals to actually apply their craft, apply their ideas and so forth into real life tangible services that we can all use and we can all be a part of. I think cryptocurrency goes a long way towards making this a reality. We've talked to an individual just ourselves last time, Remzi Bajirami, who's came up with a really amazing accountability model, and I'm not going to speak too much about it here because I think people should go and watch that episode with him talking about it to understand it in more detail. But creating these alternative technical systems that can run full societies. And if we don't kind of all come together and work on it, I think it's a great missed opportunity. But in order for us to come together and work on it will also require a tremendous amount of monetary resource, fundraising, and so forth, which I think the community can ultimately achieve. It's just going to take the right amount of I think the right leadership and the right the right kind of push, the right kind of social push and social intrinsic desire for it to happen. And I don't think that desire exists yet. I think it existed back with the Occupy movement back in 2008. I think it's coming back, but that's the sort of energy that we're going to need to kind of take a step forward on these projects. And there are a lot of them at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the amount of resources we need really pales in comparison to the amount that people feed into charities, trying to, give people a peanut butter and jelly sandwich who are living on the street, or whatever the ways of perpetually suturing the wound, the gaping and unending and perpetually reopening wound that's just being stabbed repeatedly by this automatic stabbing machine that stabs faster and more all the time. That is capitalism, that's killing us and cutting us apart and causing more problems every second of every day. That a machine, we have this charity industrial complex, the nonprofit industrial complex of all these groups and organizations and charitable individuals and philanthropists that care. They clearly care. They clearly see that there are problems in the world. It's not that they don't have a heart. It's just that they're not seeing that it's a systematic process, that all their energy and resources are not going into more efficacious and efficient means of providing people with the thing that they're most lacking. Which, as a person who has spent hundreds of hours of my life feeding unhoused neighbors, volunteering and donating and, not donating money, but because I never had any of that, but donating my time and energy to helping people, the thing people really need isn't even just housing. It isn't even just food. It's never, like giving a sandwich to an unhoused person is always like kind of more beneficial to the person giving than it is to the person getting. And that might sound crazy, but it's because, you can always find food. It's hard to find. It sucks to be hungry, but like what people really need is society. People really need community. They need wraparound services, mental health. They need to be given a sense of purpose and self-esteem
Yep.
and value. They need to be given room to grow and expand. They need community. They need safety. They need all kinds of things that you just can't give them piecemeal. You can't disperse it into a million different little charities to fix the issue that is not even discussed, which is the system itself. It's just what we're trying to create as one of those organizations in that nonprofit industrial complex, trying to expand out our organization to become a mechanism of allowing people to help people in an online, in a dispersed way, and giving people, a resource hub where they can meet each other and share skills and information and knowledge and care and support, and create groups for group therapy, and like Capitalists Anonymous, where we can move past our values and educate each other and help each other out in as many ways we can, share resources, but also work to expand this advocacy network and this product that we're selling, which is a worldview and a hope that there is a better way to live, to ultimately raise the funds and the people necessary and the resources, the human resources, to make these communities happen. And I think that's the drive that we really need to put more and more and more effort into, and bring more and more people like yourself together, Abu Bakr, so that we can make that transition happen, that we can build institutions and structures and social systems that can make these things happen. And, even one very rich person could go so far to make that happen. Instead of donating, X percentage of their salary every month of whatever, they can, help us get land in this lump sum, and we can work together to make it into something that will perpetually regenerate and that will perpetually provide that ROI, that return on investment, which is human betterment, which is innovation, which is saving people from suicide and depression and alienation, and creating community and growing food, and meeting all these needs simultaneously in this new way that we're sitting under. We see the potential, we see the possibility. We just don't have the money to do it. We don't have the resources. We don't have the attention of society. And that starts, I think, by telling that story in a bigger and better way, and connecting with people like RB, Russell Brand. Baby, get on our show. Come on. What are you waiting for?
On the topic of charity, a little side note, since we are approaching the holidays, they are upon us, just around the corner. Another message to our listeners: I would challenge you, if you're going to donate to charity, don't donate a turkey or a cheap $5 toy. And I'm sorry if I sound horrible in saying that, but people don't need religious inclusion. They need their light bill paid, or help with their rent, or their medicine bought, or a load of firewood, or something like that. Every time charity's brought up, I just think about what I met with when I talk about, what if we didn't even need charity? It's beyond amusing to try and tell someone what a resource-based economy would look like in terms of obsoleting the need for charity. I've even been told, well, that just can't be. People have to suffer. That's natural. If there's no charity, then nobody will care for anyone. No, actually, it'd be the opposite. Everybody would be equally cared for, because everybody would be equally valued. But that's just kind of like a little side tangent. So again, with the holidays upon us, if you're going to participate in charity, please do your best to make sure it is direct aid or mutual aid, and it is something that is going to actually lift that person or that family up in some way.
Yeah, and again, if you're able and willing, and would like to look at RBE United's project, we have opened a Give Send Go, which is it's similar to GoFundMe, but we opted not to use GoFundMe because GoFundMe and PayPal both canceled on two anti-establishment protests that were taking place. One in Canada, you might remember, trucker protests. So they got canceled on by GoFundMe. So there is also a bit of like a political theater taking place with these fundraising sources. But we opted to go with one called Give, Send, Go for RBE United to try and get the funding necessary to build our eco village. So that's on our website, and the website is RBE United, all one word, rbeunited.org. So that's basically the way we see things moving forward, is by just kind of raising funding on our own and then applying it towards the development of planned communities. And personally, that's the way I imagine the transition to take place, is to take place gradually through the development of these decentralized communities that are all working in tandem to kind of to build the economy of the future and the services of the future. So and that's the way that I firmly believe is going to take hold. Is going to take a lot of small decentralized communes of people operating together. So whether that's Garden, or which is the name of the community that we're putting together, or whether it is something else. It is. I recommend that people also look to doing this for themselves and to starting their own communities if they have the willingness to do so and the resources to do so.
I just appreciate your shared intention, and as my friend Travis Grant says often, your commitment to our shared direction. I just couldn't help but think that we need many examples, and we need to show people this. We need to create. We're all racing toward the same goal, which seems, so attainable and so close at hand, yet so distant, of building this little microcosm, this minimum viable product of the world we all know is possible. And I just can't help but think that when that day comes, that we're able to create that as the George Floyd protests, which was one of the largest waves of protest in human history or American history, were sparked by an image that just had a mimetic resonance and an emotional power in it, and a potency that it struck people in their hearts, and it showed them without the need for many words. 3 words, I can't breathe, that's all it took for everybody who saw that video to know where they stood on it, and a lot of people were broken out of their dream of thinking things are better than they are when they saw that. And I wonder, how can we create the positive version of that? How can we create an image of life, of humanity living together, coming into its true potential, standing up straight and tall, maturing into its adulthood, to see that beautiful social organism, that community, that structure, those windmills, those dome-shaped housing, whatever it is, that image that will break people out of their dream, that makes them tolerate driving an hour and a half in their shitty little box car, to go to their job that they hate, that makes them suffocate every day from the lack of humanity and connection, and not knowing their neighbors, of huge percentages of Americans who say they don't have one friend. That is a tragedy. That is a holocaust, a social holocaust that we should not tolerate. And if people can see there is another way, and there's no argument for that. There's no way to say people would be lazy. People would be one person would take advantage, like there's all these projections of the existing society. None of those things can hold up to just seeing humanity laughing and smiling and playing in a better way. And so that's where we're at, and I have to say that I've muscled through this episode with my mind constantly preoccupied with all of the pains that come from not living in this world, from living very much in a monetary system, in a nonsense-based economy, in a system that is anti-human in all ways. That's what I just can't. I'm very distracted and hurt inside every day that I live in this world, because I don't have this community, and I see that it's possible, and that makes it harder in some ways to function and to go through the motions of being a fucking person and watching TV and eating food and pretending like everything's fine when I know it's not. And you bring that up to people, and they think that all they hear is the negative, when partially our responsibility as communicators to convey and get them quickly past the bullshit that they don't want to look at, that they suffer through every day in ignorance, that things could be better. Things could be better. That is the most radical thought we can think. That is the slogan that needs to go through the Occupy movement of the future. Not fuck this bad thing. No, things could be much better. And that's what I want all of you watching to go out there and bring into reality.
Just say, screw this system, here's what we want to do. And to always present the alternative to each complaint.
Yes, we have to bring up solutions. Can't just complain, but man, does it feel good, doesn't it?
Of course.
Abu Bakr, do you have any closing statements?
Let's see. Well, in closing, I'll just say nothing good is going to happen unless we take some actionable steps and make it happen. And we can make the future better than the past, and we know how to do it. And our community has the right people, it has the right assets, the right minds, the right labor. We have everything we need to actually transition along to a resource-based economy. We just need to come together and do it, and we need to always look towards actions that are actionable and actions that are going to bring us closer to a transition than further away from it. And that comes with togetherness, and then developing systems by which we can be together, and by keeping that in mind and continuing to talk about a better future, and one that is actionable and within our grasp.
What is really needed is the intelligent management of the Earth's resources. A resource-based economy is based on the carrying capacity of the Earth and its resources. If you don't work in terms of existing resources, you're working in some metaphysical plane. In a resource-based economy, all resources would become the common heritage of all the world's people, and access to the necessities of life would be for all the world's people. There would be no more monetary systems or trade, barter, or any other system of human servitude.
A resource-based economy allows social advancement and worldwide reconstruction in the shortest time possible.
Under scientific scales of performance, we can provide everybody with more than they need. I'm saying that the average person in this Venus project will live better than the wealthiest people today.
To learn more about this incredible vision of a resource-based economy, the world that could be, check out the Venus Project's website, their documentaries and books. And speaking of books, Matt wasn't in this episode because he's finalizing the long-awaited Moneyless Society book, which is out now. Go on down to our website and get a copy of this long-awaited blueprint to the transition. And if you're already on board with this vision, reach out and join us. Join our organization to help us create a real pathway to sustainability together. There are so many of us out there who understand, who see the potential, who know that it's possible. We just have to do it. We can't sit around waiting for this system to collapse or for the culture to catch up to us. Enough of us get it. Enough of us see the potentials and have the skills, the knowledge, the science, and the understanding to make it happen. We just have to come together and do it. That's what our organization and our movement is about. Building steps to that beautiful vision that Jacques Fresco spent his entire life developing. And finally, creating that future world today.